Here's what's coming up on The World Today. Ukrainian forces set to be retaking territory in northeastern areas in recent days as Russian forces focus on the Donbas region further south. Russian president threatens reaction from Moscow following expansion of military infrastructure on its territory. And more than a million COVID cases feared in North Korea as leader Kim Jong-un, land-based health officials ordering the army to help distribute medicine. Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Amarachi Ubani in Lagos. Let's begin you up to speed now. We're learning Russia's Ministry of Defense may have reached an agreement with Ukraine for wounded soldiers to be evacuated from the besieged Azovstal steelworks in Mariupol. State News in Russia is reporting that under the terms of the agreement, soldiers who are currently trapped in the plant will be taken to a hospital in Russian-controlled territory. This has not been confirmed yet. In the meantime, the Swedish government has decided the country will seek NATO membership after decades of non-alignment. The Prime Minister made the announcement after a 3-hour debate with Parliament today, saying she feels confident of public support. Comes a day, though, after Finland formally announced it would apply to join the alliance. Russia's President Vladimir Putin says NATO expansion is a problem for Moscow. Hundreds of people, however, in the southern Turkish province of Adana have voiced their opposition to the military presence of the US-led North Atlantic Treaty Organization near an airbase in Incirlik. There's more in this report.
The US Congress will seek to ratify Finland's application to join the Western military alliance NATO before going on holiday in August. US Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell said in Helsinki today after meeting Finland's president. Senator McConnell said there was broad bipartisan support among US lawmakers for Finnish membership.
With regard to the news of today, I think I'm safe in saying there's strong bipartisan support in the United States for admission of Finland to the world's most successful military alliance. There's never been a more successful military alliance than NATO. Finland brings a lot to the alliance. Frankly, their participation strengthens the alliance significantly. And it's a great honor to happen to be here on the day when your request for admission is official. And let me say that the goal in the United States will be to approve that as rapidly as possible.
President Niinistö, who confirmed on Sunday that Finland would apply for NATO membership, said it was not only about the membership, but solving the crisis in Ukraine.
We had a very interesting discussion, not only dealing with Finnish membership in NATO, but also Ukraine and how we see world developing, getting better, how we get rid of these problems we have, the crisis in Ukraine. Very important issues. And once again, it's very valuable to have you here. Thank you.
Meanwhile, earlier, hundreds of people gathered near airbase in the southern Turkish province of Adana to voice their opposition to the military presence of the US-led North Atlantic Treaty Organization. About hundreds of meters away from the base, protesters were chanting slogans, holding banners reading, "Get out, NATO, this land is ours." Some protesters believe that NATO, being a military alliance, has led to massive numbers of bloodshed in the neighboring areas.
We are here to protest the NATO quarters in Incirlik. We're saying that it is the source of every manipulation, every vicious attack that has been done to the Turkish people and the surrounding countries. And they do not belong to it. Their manipulative interruptions are not welcome, and they are seen. We will not stop until they are banished from our lands.
According to Estonian foreign minister speaking on the sidelines of a NATO foreign ministers meeting in Berlin, she hopes for a quick solution to the dispute between Turkey, Finland and Sweden on the Nordic countries' NATO membership. She says the overall approach and atmosphere had been very supportive because those countries have been long-time partners of NATO.
The overall approach and atmosphere in our meetings here at Berlin have been very supportive because those countries have been long-time partners of NATO. We have exercised together in foreign missions. We have had defense cooperation with those countries, and they are long-established democracies, which really would strengthen also the security. Becoming a member, they would also help to strengthen the overall security of the transatlantic area.
Meanwhile, EU foreign ministers are seeking to publicly pressure Hungary to lift its veto on a proposed oil embargo on Russia, with Lithuania saying the bloc was being held hostage by one member state. The embargo proposed by the European Commission in early May would be the harshest sanction yet after Moscow's February 24 invasion of Ukraine, and includes carve-outs for EU states most dependent on Russian oil.
And now, unfortunately, the whole union is being held hostage by one member state who cannot help us find their consensus.
And we'll do our best in order to deblock the situation. I cannot ensure that this is going to happen because the positions are quite strong. But I think that if we understand the particular situations of some member states, and all of us make an effort in order to present a united front against Russia, we'll succeed.
But Hungary, Moscow's closest ally in the EU, has said it wants hundreds of millions of euros from the bloc to mitigate the cost of ditching Russian crude. The EU needs all 27 states to agree to the embargo for it to go ahead.
Joining me now is former Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Joe Keshi. He is in Abuja. Ambassador, thank you for making time to be with me today. We did see this coming, right? More membership in the NATO, even though it will take about a year for NATO and Finland to eventually become members. How does this change the landscape of the war and relations in Europe?
I'm not sure. By the way, good evening and thanks for having me. I'm not sure it will change the landscape in Europe immediately, but I think this goes back to some conversation we've had in the past. When I keep maintaining that for some of those states around Russia that have tried to join the European Union and NATO, it was because of the overbearing behavior of Russia. And now the Ukraine war has provoked or instigated Finland and Sweden, to see the danger apparent if they are not protected in one way or the other, should in case Russia decides to attack any of these countries. And by the way, there was a documentary made by CNN I think on Saturday night. I think it was on the Finnish preparation in case of any attack. You will see that for long years, over 70 years, Finland has been living in apprehension that Russia could attack. And they've been making preparation, building huge bunkers under the ground in case there was an attack. And so at the end of the Russians must hold themselves responsible, for the expansion of NATO, because they created fears among neighboring countries because of their overbearing attitude. And the decision of these two countries who want to be members of NATO is a clear example, typical example. And so for those who are arguing, against, for those who are supporting, saying that, NATO provoked this war and the rest of it, I think they should be realistic enough to admit that the behavior of Russia did not itself help. The fear it created among neighboring states, particularly former Soviet Union, has been responsible for their desire to seek protection elsewhere And for them, the only protection they can get is from NATO.
Yeah, indeed. And I remember the Swedish Prime Minister saying yesterday that this is for Sweden's security. I mean, the membership for NATO is for Sweden's security.
Absolutely.
President Vladimir Putin yesterday said that following his conversation with the Finnish president, who called him on Saturday night to inform him of his decision, that this would be a mistake. Do you think that Finland, at least which shares a closer border with Russia than Sweden, is currently under threat as well? You talk about, the preparations that we're making in case, of an attack, and Russia building this atmosphere of fear in the region. Do you think that Finland currently is under threat by Russia?
Look, for so many years, both countries, particularly Finland, have maintained neutrality. They have maintained maritime neutrality, in particular with the Soviet Union, because they share a large border. They have a long, sea in between them. And so, certainly, the fear of Russia, and the fact that if anything happens, they will certainly need some help, unlike Ukraine that is not a member. And by the way, let's also be realistic. For so many years, Finland, Sweden, they have virtually cooperated with NATO. They have conducted military exercises, together. And in fact, during the start of this war, they have actually done some military exercises together in case of, as we say in this part of the world, any eventualities, So it is not something strange or something unexpected, but this has been instigated, or the process made faster, by the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah, it did seem inevitable, didn't it? And then again today, President Putin says there's no real threat if Sweden and Finland join NATO, but he says Russia will respond if NATO bolsters military infrastructure and the new Nordic members. Sweden mentioned yesterday one of the bases for which it would be joining NATO would be that there will be no military bases in Sweden. You think it's feasible in the near future?
Look, what we should bear in mind is Article 5 of NATO, which says that an attack on one country
is an attack on all.
It's an attack on all. So whether there is delay or no delay, or whether the Russians like it, or whether the Swedish, whether military infrastructure is placed in Sweden or in Finland at the end of the day, should the Russians attack any of these two countries when they become members of NATO, definitely NATO members will react collectively. And that's obvious. And I'm sure that, look, let's be realistic. No matter what we say of Putin today, he himself must be considering that some mistakes have been made, because for Finland, and particularly Finland and Sweden, to want to become members of NATO after close to 60, 70 years, simply as a result of this war in Ukraine, he must at least take responsibility that they created the atmosphere of the changing dynamics that has encouraged the two countries, particularly Finland, to want to apply to be a member of NATO.
Now, one of the reasons Russia did invade Ukraine is because of Ukraine's intentions to join NATO. Well, that has been abandoned now. But with Finland, which shares a closer border with Russia, this is a long shot, but do you think that Russia could invade Finland as well, seeing that Finland is making moves to join NATO? And this was one of the reasons that it invaded Ukraine, because it said, this was too close, to its own area of sphere of influence.
I don't think that Russia would. Well, look, at the start of this whole crisis, many of us were confident that the Russians would invade Ukraine, and they did. But I think the dynamics are different here. Look, Ukraine was a member of the former Soviet Union. And they've had this relationship with some Russian-speaking Ukrainians in there, particularly in the Donbass area and things like that. But as against Sweden, Sweden has never been a member of the omnibus Soviet Union of the past. And so Putin may not be, so
I think you mean
worried.
Finland, not Sweden. I think you mean Finland.
Finland. I don't think that Finland, I don't think that Putin would be so worried about Finland, despite the closeness, the border that they share together. It's a different situation between why he went to war in Ukraine and the situation, the developing situation in Finland. Completely different situation.
Well, interesting to note. And I know the Ukrainian forces have been making it to the border with Russia in Kharkiv. They consider that a victory on its own. But there have also been reports of Russian forces retreating. Many would consider this a good sign. But for many analysts, this might be Russia retreating to return stronger. Am I right?
Absolutely, you are right. Look, this is good news for the Ukrainians and for all the supporters of Ukraine. But the fact is, two things we must bear in mind. The more defeat that Russia suffers, the more Putin is determined to destroy and to go into Ukraine. Look, Russia considers itself as a major world power. Russia sees itself as one of the powers that control the world. And it's not going to allow a small Ukraine to humiliate it. And this is why I keep hoping that somewhere along the line, the rest of the world will be able to, to bring both sides together before Russia loses its, really goes mad and begin to, do more harm or damage than it has done already. So for Ukraine, this is good news. This is an interesting development. Every inch of territory reclaimed by Ukraine, it's a plus for Ukraine and the people of Ukraine. They need such good news. They need such inspiration. But we should also be worried as to how Russia will react at the end of the day. This is a long, drawn-out war. Russia is not going to give up. Ukraine is not prepared to give up. But the disadvantage of Ukraine is that Ukraine does not have all the military might and power. So it's just taking it one city on, one day at a time, one city at a time, and trying to liberate its country. But certainly it's a good development. But look, this is a long, drawn-out war, and the Russians are not going to back out. And quite frankly, they might actually be retreating in order to relaunch their attack, or they might focus on the Donbass area, which remains their, the area where they want to focus on.
Indeed, Ambassador. Thank you so much, Ambassador Joe Keshi, for joining us on the program. Thank you for your analysis. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me. Thanks.
Well, when we come back after the break on The World Today. More than 1 million COVID cases in North Korea. Kim Jong-un, leader, and base health officials ordering the army to help distribute the medicine. Stay with us. Welcome back to The World Today. Russian President Vladimir Putin today met with his Tajikistan counterpart, Emomali Rahmon, head of the annual summit of the Collective Security Treaty Organization holding in Moscow. Military alliance is sometimes called Moscow's answer to NATO. It draws on the armed forces of its 6 members: Russia, Belarus, Armenia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. According to the Kremlin, President Putin noted at the meeting that Russia remains one of the major trading partners of Tajikistan. Russia, with overall active forces of 900,000, is by far the CSTO's most powerful member. And it's that time of the year again for the Davos meetings this month. But rather than the usual cold and snow, there will be warm weather for leaders to enjoy. Now, back in December, organizers postponed the meeting of government, business and other leaders just before its traditional January slot, citing the difficulties of holding an in-person conference during the coronavirus pandemic. Simply putting on the event after a 2-year hiatus is welcome news to locals who, a 2017 study showed, benefit from a 6 $100 million windfall every time Davos takes place. Construction crews have been finishing up pop-up networking facilities for the business and political elite that transcend for the May 22nd to 26th conference, while soldiers are erecting security fences. The Swiss government will deploy as many as 5,000 military personnel to support local police. Air Force jets will again circle above to enforce a no-fly zone. Now, the World Economic Forum says the meeting will bring together more than 2,000 leaders and experts from around the world, somewhat smaller than some past meetings. But no government or corporate bigwigs from Russia have been invited, and that's because of the war going on in Ukraine. Leaders will be discussing the pandemic recovery, tackling climate change, the future for work, accelerating stakeholder capitalism, and harnessing new technologies.
All the people here are very glad that the World Economic Forum is coming back now. It's another step back to the normality. And the people know about the World Economic Forum here. They know how important it is for Davos, it is for whole Switzerland. And I think all the people here are very happy to have the World Economic Forum back. Yeah. It was a very, very difficult time because we don't have any Congress. So the whole Congress business was dead, no works. And that was a very, very hard time for us as a tourism destination.
Well, snow-wise, it's of course we don't have to shovel, so we don't have to do that. We don't have to take care of the icy roads. But other than that, now it's great because we have a sunny weather. But this is the only difference. Yeah. It's better to have the WEF now in spring than not having it at all.
In the Americas, lengthy queues have been forming at the diminishing number of petrol stations still in business in Laos as a fuel crisis deepens in the country. A video we're about to show you, there it is, shows people queuing with plastic bottles and containers at one station in the capital city, Vientiane, on May 10th. A local media reported that several fuel stations had to close last week amid news that the country's fuel supply was drying up due to the weakened KIP currency, high inflation and unstable global oil market. The Laotian government and related agencies have held emergency meetings to find solutions to the fuel crisis. But in America, though, vigils and prayer services and rallies have been holding across the city of Buffalo following the mass shooting at a supermarket on Saturday evening. A gunman, 18-year-old Peyton Gendron, who was arraigned yesterday, was wearing a tactical gear and live-streaming camera when he carried out the dastardly act. Buffalo Police Commissioner Joseph Gramaglia said 11 of the 13 people who were shot at the Tops Friendly Markets were black, while the suspect was taken into custody at the scene is white. The FBI is investigating the shooting as a hate crime and racially motivated violent extremism. Officials say that they will weigh additional charges for Peyton in the coming days. Well, there was another shooting on Sunday, this time in Geneva Presbyterian Church in Laguna Wood, California. A video shows the moment police arrived at the scene. At least one person was killed and 5 people wounded. A suspect has been taken into custody. The Orange County Sheriff's Department said in a Twitter message all of the victims were adults and were being taken to hospital, while one victim died at the scene. It's at least a second mass shooting over the weekend in the U.S., which has been plagued with gun violence in recent years. Authorities in California, however, have not made any statement regarding a possible motive in the church shooting. Our Washington correspondent Maria Bird joins us now. Maria, we've had these conversations before, haven't we, about gun violence and the mass shootings, which seem to be making a comeback in the United States.
You're exactly correct. It's a very unfortunate time when you see the gun violence coming back. And as you said, some of these being motivated by hate crime. And so the U.S. has seen a spike in hate crimes 12 times what it was 5 years ago. And so it's a major issue that the president, the attorney general for the U.S. is putting as a #1 priority because there has to be something, and especially within the African American and within the Asian community. And so that is where we're seeing the greatest increase in hate crimes.
And let's talk about the shooting in California. It was at the Presbyterian Church. If my memory serves me right, Maria, this is the second mass shooting taking place in a church, I think, in the last 5 years, as you rightly point out. And the California government still hasn't made a statement about this. What's going on there?
You're exactly correct. If you remember, in South Carolina, there was a church shooting several years ago, and this one was a Taiwanese church, which really does bring, and I know that many are concerned about tying it to a hate crime until that is being proved. I know the individual that they've stated they believe, it is suspected that he is of Asian descent. They have not said exactly what his ethnic background is, but it is definitely going to be clearly investigated as to was this church targeted because it was a Taiwanese church with many Taiwanese Americans that attended.
And is this a fallout, of some of the protests that have happened in the last 1 year with the killing of many African-American men by police officers? And is this like a backlash, of that?
It's somewhat a backlash in some ways, but if you look at what's been happening and what they're really looking at from the Trump era, and you go back, really toward the beginning of that time frame and when we begin to hear about what many are considering kind of a new Republican Party, those who follow former President Trump, you can see that it has definitely been a clear focus on individuals with white supremacy. You can see social media. Many social media platforms today are trying to find ways to avoid having some of those images that we saw from that Buffalo, New York shooting being passed through because they're concerned that that is definitely igniting many individuals across the United States who are buying into some of the white supremacy and hate crime activity. We've also known that the individual from the Buffalo shooting, of the 13 individuals that were shot, 11 were African Americans. We know he went specifically to an African American community. We also know that on his actual gun, the word nigger was written on there. And so there are some very clear indications that really tie this to a hate crime. And we also know that in addition to this, in June of 2021, the individual also was being investigated for some threats at his high school. So it's really about how is the government, how are police going to be able to really wrap themselves around being able to decrease what we've seen escalating over the past 5 years.
The shooter in the Buffalo supermarket, 18-year-old Peyton, did buy that gun at a store, and the storekeeper said they'd run checks on him, nothing came up, and there was no reason why they couldn't sell the gun to him, which makes me wonder where America is at with gun control.
We can expect to see that there are going to be more gun control laws brought forward, especially by the Democrats. Gun control has been, as you know, many of the guns that are able to be purchased by young individuals are what they call ghost guns. I mean, there's a whole myriad of ways that people have been able to avoid some of the gun control laws. They have purchased guns, what many would consider illegally. So I would say that we're probably going to see when the president begins to speak formally about this, he will be going to visit those families over the next day or two in Buffalo, New York, that we will see the Attorney General come out with further thoughts around additional gun control measures.
Pretty worrying situation there in the U.S. Maria, do stay safe, and thanks for briefing us on the latest.
Thank you.
To North Korea now, where state-run broadcaster KRT today aired footage of leader Kim Jong-un visiting pharmacies around the capital, Pyongyang, as the country fights to curb its first confirmed outbreak of COVID-19. President Kim made the visits yesterday and also convened an emergency Politburo meeting on the same day, in which he ordered the country's military to stabilize distribution of COVID-19 medicine in the capital. Although authorities had ordered distribution of national reserves of medicine, Leader Kim said pharmacies were not well equipped to perform their functions smoothly. He has also criticized the irresponsible work attitude, organization and execution of the cabinet and the public health sector. So here's how bad things really are in North Korea. With no COVID-19 vaccinations officially, the country appears to be battling its first outbreak of a combination of common painkillers and antibiotics, as well as home remedies such as gargling salt water and drinking herbal teas. North Korea is one of only 2 countries in the world, the other being Eritrea, that have yet to begin a vaccination campaign, and until last week had insisted it was COVID-free. During an interview with state television, a health official said the country had switched from a quarantine system to a treatment system to handle the hundreds of thousands of suspected fever cases reported each day. The state official encouraged patients to use painkillers, fever relievers such as paracetamol and ibuprofen, and antibiotics such as amoxicillin to treat COVID-19 and its symptoms. It also urged people to gargle salt water or drink honeysuckle tea or willow leaf tea 3 times a day. Previously, state media also suggested using burdock root as a cure while playing down vaccines as no universal panacea. But in China, medical and security staff in protective clothing have been on the streets of the capital, Beijing, at residential compounds and other parts. As 3 more days of mass testings have been commissioned and a work-from-home order extended to quash the COVID-19 outbreak. Despite denying rumors of a lockdown, authorities say they have already banned dine-in services at restaurants, closed some malls, entertainment and tourist venues, and suspended sections of its bus and subway systems. The state says it found 55 new cases in the last 24 hours to 3 p.m. yesterday, 10 of which were outside areas that are under quarantine. The city is scrambling to stamp out such community infections. Shanghai has achieved zero COVID at the community level in 15 out of 16 of its districts. During a press conference today, Vice Mayor of Shanghai Municipality, Zhong Ming, reported that the number of people in quarantine and control areas have been reduced to less than 1 million. A city reported 69 confirmed locally transmitted COVID-19 cases and 869 local asymptomatic cases on Sunday. What's happening in Europe? Paris commuters say they're feeling free as France abandons compulsory mask wearing in public transport. It was a breath of fresh air for many Parisian transport users, as French commuters are finally able to take the metro, a train or bus without wearing a mask for the first time since the COVID pandemic hit the country in 2020. According to images filmed in Gare Saint-Lazare station, just less than half the people commuting were seen wearing masks. Some still unsure how safe it is without one. The European Commission says at the end of April, between 60% and 80% of the EU population has been estimated to have been infected with COVID-19 as the bloc enters a post-emergency phase in which mass reporting of cases has become no longer necessary. An organization representing 12 Christian denominations has condemned an Israeli riot police charge at the funeral of a Palestinian Christian Al Jazeera journalist, describing the actions as a violation of freedom of religion. Mourners, some of them carrying Palestinian flags, were escorting the coffin of Shireen Abu Akleh, a dual U.S. citizen from the convent-run St. Joseph Hospital, to the Greek Melkite Cathedral of the Annunciation of the Virgin when police charged. Friday's incidents, during which baton-wielding officers beat Abu Akleh's pallbearers, was broadcast live globally, with new in anger at the reporter being shot dead during an Israeli military raid in the occupied West Bank. Well, back here in Africa, Somalia has elected a new president. He is Sheikh Mohammed, still brand new after the country's rare elections on Sunday. 329 MPs were at the international airport to participate in the elections. Sheikh Mohammed eventually got 239 votes. Current President Farmajo got only 109. The country only has one part of the city, which is Mogadishu, the capital, as its main government hold. The other part is seriously contended by the Al-Shabaab militants.
After much delay, intense pressure from the international community, and a precarious security atmosphere, Somalia finally has a new president. President-elect Hassan Sheikh Mohamud is the known face to Somalia. He had ruled the country between 2012 and 2017. The vote on Sunday was only by lawmakers in an airport hangar protected from Islamist insurgents by blast walls. It was a long day with 3 rounds of voting. Now Mohamud again faces the daunting task of tackling drought, hunger, and seemingly never-ending conflict. Somalia's 15 million people have endured civil war and clan battles with no strong central governments since dictator Mohamed Siad Barre was toppled in 1991. Earlier, blasts from mortar shells rang out near Mogadishu airport, where the vote was held. But there was no claim of responsibility and the explosions did not disrupt the vote. Simply holding the elections is a success of sorts, but Somalia is still unable to hold a direct vote due to insecurity. The 66-year-old also faces the task of proving his skeptics wrong, who complained that the leading candidates were old faces recycled from the past and have done little to stem conflict and corruption.
Yemen's national airline operated today its first commercial flight in years from the capital Sana'a, raising hopes for renewal of a United Nations brokered truce in the 7-year-old conflict that has pitted a Saudi-led coalition against the Iran-aligned Houthis and put Middle East security in peril. Water cannons sprayed Sana'a airport's runway as an airplane of the national carrier Yemenia landed against the backdrop of destroyed buildings surrounding the airfield. Dozens of Yemenis, including patients who waited years for medical treatment, went through security checks in the airport's terminal, which has been deserted since 2015, when the coalition intervened in Yemen's civil war after the Houthis ousted the internationally recognized government in the previous year. The coalition controls Yemen's airspace and its seas. Well, this weekend we announced the death of Saudi Arabia's King Salman bin Abdulaziz. Not Saudi Arabia, that would be the United Arab Emirates, but in Saudi Arabia, though, the royal court announced that the 86-year-old King Salman bin Abdulaziz left hospital following a colonoscopy last week. This is a video from Saudi TV showing the monarch walking slowly using a cane as he left King Faisal Specialist Hospital in the city of Jeddah, where he was admitted on the evening of May 7th. An entourage kept close, and his son, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the kingdom's de facto ruler, appeared also in the clip. King Salman, the custodian of Islam's holiest sites, became ruler of the world's top oil producer in 2015 after spending more than 2.5 years as the Crown Prince and Deputy Premier. He underwent bladder surgery in 2020 and had the battery of his heart pacemaker replaced in March. I mentioned the Emirates earlier. World leaders ascended on the country on Sunday to offer condolences to new leader Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan on the death of his half-brother, President Khalifa bin Zayed, in a show of support to a key regional player. Sheikh Mohammed, who's now ruler of wealthy Abu Dhabi Emirates, steered the Western Allied Gulf state, an OPEC oil producer and regional business hub for years before being named the UAE's third president by a federal Supreme Council on Saturday. Israeli President Isaac Herzog said before heading to the Emirati capital that the establishment of ties between the UAE and Israel 2 years ago was an asset for the whole region, built by bold and groundbreaking leaders, including Khalifa. President of Palestine Mahmoud Abbas traveled to the UAE to offer his condolences, while Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson arrived later on Sunday to Abu Dhabi. Qatar's Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani also visited and met with Sheikh Mohammed. The Qatari Amiri Diwan said, and first such a visit since 2017, when the UAE and Saudi Arabia imposed a boycott on Doha. Doha and Abu Dhabi had been for years locked in a bitter rivalry over the role of the political Islam in the world, in the Muslim world. The rift was partially resolved last year. Now, US President Joe Biden, whose administration has had fraught ties with the UAE and with Saudi Arabia, will be represented by Vice President Kamala Harris, who is due to visit today. Several Arab leaders also paid their respects on Saturday. Still ahead on the program. You may have seen it already. Full lunar eclipse, creating rare super blood moon as Earth's orbit is positioned directly between the sun and the moon. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching The World Today. The 5th Global Conference on the Elimination of Child Labour has begun in Durban, South Africa, with the theme Raising Hands for Children. The event, put together by the International Labour Organization and UNICEF, aims to share good practices and push for more action towards elimination of child labour. Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Ms. Amina Mohammed, sent in a goodwill message appealing for more action and commitment to agreed goals. According to the International Labour Organization, more than 160 million children worldwide are still engaged in child labour. The Director General of the body, Guy Ryder, appealed for more work than talk during this year's conference, as members are on the uptick exacerbated by conflict, migration and other humanitarian crises. The host president, Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa, outlined some of what should be done.
The 5th conference is the first in Africa since the first edition, hosted by Norway in 1997. The aim is to eradicate child labour by 2025, and that's a goal set by the United Nations.
Child labour is quite simply wrong, and the only solution to this crisis is a rights-based approach, one that recognises and upholds the rights that every child has to health, education and protection, a right to a future.
According to the International Labour Organization, ILO, more than 160 million children the world over are denied their childhood through forced labour practices, and the number is still ticking up. This has been made worse by conflict situations, migration uncertainties, poverty, and lately the COVID-19 pandemic, which has seen many schools shut down and children left vulnerable to child labour and even early marriages.
We all know the root causes of this grave human rights violation: poverty, informality, limited access to education, weak or lacking social protection floors, insufficient labour inspection and weak governance.
We do know what needs to be done. We do know what works against child labour. And the time has come to make sure that our commitments are put into practical action that delivers for children and for their families.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa emphasized on the importance of improving access to education for all children, regardless of their socio-economic backgrounds.
We wish the governments, employer organizations, labor organizations, and all stakeholders success in the vital work they have to undertake to ensure that the rights of children are respected.
Standing before you is Thato Mhlungu.
For the first time in the conference's history, a young person addressed the gathering. Thato Mhlungu is the former speaker of the Nelson Mandela Children's Parliament.
We as the children, we will continue, dark or blue, we will continue to fight for our rights. Beke li beke, khwedi li khwedi, ngwaha li ngwaha. Tango!
25 years after the Oslo conference, child labor is still a global challenge. The UN's set deadline of 2025 is just 3 years away. And we asked some of the delegates if this could just be another talk session or there is hope that something tangible will come out of it.
I do not think it's just another talk. I really believe it touches everybody. Everybody wants to contribute. Social partners are here to obviously support these initiatives and see how best we can do it. We are here to take in from best practices and really just drive the national, regional, and global agenda.
In Ghana, we have a proverb which says that the child breaks the snail but does not break the tortoise, because the tortoise had a very hard cover. So we must go back to children breaking snails and enjoying.
The conference is taking place in South Africa's coastal city, Durban, and has a number of Nobel Peace Laureates and child's rights activists in attendance. The gathering will end on the 20th of May and is expected to come up with the Durban call to action to eradicate child labor.
If you're in India, you're already experiencing the sweltering heat going across the country, and it's about to get even worse. There'll be more days of that, according to the weatherman. Large parts of India are anticipating currently more days of brutal heat, with temperatures expected to blow past records. This unprecedented heat wave has meant the vast majority of the country's poor workers who tend to labour outdoors are exposed to scorching temperatures. For construction workers, life at a building site or the outskirts of the capital is hard enough. Temperatures in the capital, New Delhi, have hit sweltering numbers, often causing people in the construction sites and who work outside to fall sick, and for them sick days mean no income. India suffered its hottest March in more than 100 years, and parts of the country experienced the highest temperatures on record in April. Well, depending on what part of the world you're in, you may have seen it. A full red moon illuminated the Mediterranean sky earlier today during the first supermoon and lunar eclipse of 2022. The supermoon was seen clearly behind a windmill in the Almeria region in southern Spain, near the Cabo de Gata National Park. A total lunar eclipse occurs when the moon passes through the Earth's shadow. It appears red, which is known as a blood moon because light is scattered through the Earth's atmosphere, much like during a sunset. The supermoon takes the name of super blood moon due to the moon being at its closest point to the Earth in its orbit. Meanwhile, people across Latin America were dazzled Sunday night by the first supermoon and lunar eclipse. A supermoon rose in a clear evening sky over Buenos Aires, Argentina, and Caracas, Venezuela. But one of the best views of the eclipse was seen in Santiago de Chile. Wish we'd seen it. The Cannes Film Festival, however, is gearing up for a bumper year for its 75th anniversary with a selection of big Hollywood names, buzzy newcomers, and a new number of previous Palme d'Or winners. A splashy return, even as the conflict in Ukraine looms over festivities. The festival runs from May 17 to 28th, resuming its traditional calendar following 2 years of pandemic disruptions. It was cancelled in 2020 and last year moved to July when it was held under strict COVID protocols.
I honestly think this is one of the best Cannes lineups in years. I mean, you've got a couple of really big Hollywood movies, Top Gun Maverick, which has been waiting 2 years to hit theaters because it was delayed because of COVID, held back. It's finally going to come out and be shown here on the red carpet. You've got Elvis, a Baz Luhrmann film about the king of rock and roll, so promises to be a huge sort of spectacular, which can never do better than to have a stage like this here in Cannes. And then Cannes has done what it does best, which is sort of pick out the world's best auteurs, art house directors. You've got a new film from David Cronenberg, which I'm really excited to see. He hasn't made a film in years, and he's finally come back. He's got a film called Crimes of the Future, which looks phenomenal. And you just have this incredible mix of European and Asian art house, a couple of big Hollywood movies, and I'm sure a lot of sort of smaller surprises that will come up over the next 2 weeks.
I guess it will be an interesting summer after all. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you later.